Good evening and welcome to you all. This is the Lanu Meetup, our new way of meeting and gathering in an effort to raise our vibration. And why do we want to raise our vibration? Well, when we increase our frequency, it does become easier to manifest the life that we want. So we are meeting and gathering and having people join us to share their beautiful gifts of wisdom in an effort to help us understand the various ways in which we can raise our vibration. Tonight I have with me Leisa Kelly, who I call the Crystal Queen. I know that others refer to her as the Crystal Lady, but when you get to know her a little bit more tonight, you will understand that she is multi-layered in her wisdom and her understanding and her gifts. So just to call her a lady, I feel undersells her beauty that she brings to this world. Leisa Kelly, welcome to our Lanu Meetup.
Oh, thank you so much, Taryn. That's so beautiful. I'm blushing. So thank you for having me, and I apologize. My glasses have that film on it that stops computer light reflecting on them, so it doesn't matter where I move, but you can see the purpley bluey light, so I apologize for that, but thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and wearing glasses is extremely difficult when you're running these sessions because, you know, the reflection on glasses makes it difficult. I take my glasses off and all of a sudden all of your faces are in a complete blur and it feels like I've entered another dimension. So it does feel a bit surreal, and I do get that funny look on my face while I'm trying to find something. Leisa, now I call you the Crystal Queen. However, you haven't always been heavily involved in crystals the way you're doing it now. You used to actually lead a fairly normal life. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, look, I don't know if my background has ever been normal, but I tried to be normal for a very long time. So when I first left university, I got myself somehow involved in adult education, and my background was business and IT. So my skills were building computers and running networks. And I worked at a community college, so I thought, I can do this teaching thing. Like, this is really easy. Surely I can do this. So in my normal fashion, I went off and learned everything that there was to know about being an adult education teacher. And I started teaching. And yeah, so that was when I was about 23, 24. So up until maybe 2 years ago, I've been working in adult education in various scenes, mostly corporate, over the last 15, 20 years in senior management positions, running national or international even registered training organisations. So, and once I kind of got to the top of the ladder, I decided that it was way too hard. I wasn't very resilient, and I started making my way back down the ladder until 18 months ago, or November 2018, I finally gave up the day job and moved into my business full time. But I had been running my side gig for about four and a half years before I gave up work.
But I do love the fact that you were doing your business degree, and one of your first assignments or assessments, you actually did it on crystals. So, you know, this has been running thick in your blood for a very long time.
It has. And I don't remember where I first started to learn about crystals, but I do remember, and a story that I tell my students is that the first crystal that I can remember breaking was when I was about 15, and my parents had given me a rose quartz heart that lived on a chain. And my mother was yelling at me one day, and the rose quartz heart snapped in half and broke off the chain. So that was the first time that I can remember a crystal breaking. And I truly believe it broke because I didn't know you had to cleanse crystals back then. And I think it broke of a broken heart. You know, carrying the grief of a 15-year-old girl who didn't get along with her mother just was too much for it.
Gee, that's an interesting start, because a lot of people don't really get that understanding of a crystal breaking all by itself until
Yeah.
much further in their journey. So you then got into crystals, and you've been doing this uh, as your day job now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And we've got all these people gathered today, and they're all a little bit curious about the do's and the don'ts with crystals. And you've just mentioned the first one about cleansing. Now that kind of sounds a little bit scary to people. Can you run us through a little bit about how you look after your crystals?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, crystals, the reason that crystals need to be cleansed is that they carry energy and they carry information. So, and they store information. So these days, you know, science is well behind where we are, what we know about crystals. But science has proven that a quartz crystal in particular stores information. And that's why you can't live without crystals these days, because they're in our cars, they're in our computers, they're in our watches, they're in our radios, they're in our surgical equipment, all of that stuff. And so a quartz crystal in particular stores lots of information. So if you are wearing a crystal around your neck, for example, day after day after day, and not cleansing it, it's taking on all of that energy that you're picking up, both from your emotions and all of the people that you come in contact with. So that's why they break if you haven't cleansed them. They also change color, they change form, they grow things in them and on them. So they do all sorts of weird things. So cleansing is really, really important, and cleansing often is really important as well. So I'll talk about how often you cleanse after I tell you how to cleanse them. So there's lots of ways to cleanse crystals, and there are really no wrong ways. There are some wrong ways for some crystals, which I'll talk about soon. But there is no really wrong way. It's all about your intention and what you put into cleansing your crystal. So some crystals don't need much cleansing, and other crystals will need a lot of cleansing, okay, depending on the work that they're doing. So my favorite way of cleansing crystals is using sound. So sound crystals are a vibration, they're a frequency, and that is of course what music is. So crystals love the sound, the high vibrational sound. So I use my things like crystal bowls, my singing bowls, Tibetan bowls. I have a couple of, what do you call them, bells? My drum, of course. And the other noise that they love is your voice. Okay, so they love being spoken to in beautiful words. So I don't know if anybody has seen Dr. Emoto's work or the rice experiments, which I won't talk too much about unless people want to hear about them. But it's the same as children as well. The more you speak lovingly to somebody, the more it grows, the more happier it is, and the more it gives you back. So it's exactly the same for crystals. The more love you give it, the more love it gives you back. So that's why speaking to it, and that's why I kiss mine and tell them that I love them. And therefore they give much, much love and joy back to me. So the singing bowls is, or the sound is my absolute favourite. A lot of people like to put their crystals out in the full moon. And I find that, first of all, I don't put that many crystals out in the full moon these days, because I just have far too many to carry out. And I'm often not home on a full moon for some reason. But I like to open my curtains and ask Grandmother Moon to shine her light in through the window. And because it's all about that intention. She doesn't care that my crystals aren't out underneath, you know, in the shining in her light. And I feel that the moon more energizes my crystals rather than just a cleanse. So you'll find that when you put your crystals out in the full moon, or set that intention to shine the light, is that they'll look different the next day. It's almost like they've risen up and they're like, oh, singing and being beautiful and taken back to their full vibration. So, so the moon for me is a really beautiful way to energize my crystals. And then, of course, there's lots of other ways. And if anyone wants to ask me a particular question about if they're doing it right or wrong, you can ask that at the end if you like. But the easiest way to cleanse a crystal is by using your intention. So you can just simply hold it in your hand, ask that all of the energy, and the words that you use are completely up to you, but the words that I use are, I'm asking that all of the negative energy be removed from my crystal and the crystal be returned to its fullest power and energy. And then I usually blow on it 3 times and that's it. Okay, so some crystals will need more than that, but I cleanse my crystals a lot. Okay, so mine generally don't need, sometimes I get a call that a crystal needs to be buried out in the earth, and I cry when that happens, because for me, when I get the call to say that a crystal needs to go into the ground, I know that that crystal is not coming back to me. So it's time for that crystal to return back to the earth. But that is another really beautiful way of cleansing, deeply cleansing a crystal, is returning it back into the earth. Okay, so that's cleansing it. The second thing you need to know about is how often you cleanse. So depending on what kind of work you're doing with the crystal and how often you use it will depend on how often you need to clean it. So for example, my crystals that I wear every day get cleansed every time that I wear them, okay? Because I'm highly sensitive, I'm an empath, so I come into lots of contact with energies that aren't mine. I have lots of people coming in through my house because I work from home. My partner also works in a jail and brings energies home that aren't so pleasant all of the time. So my crystals get cleansed every time I wear them, okay, for jewelry. Then all of my crystals that I use in my healing space on clients also get cleansed every time I use them. So every time I have a client in, they get cleansed. Now I do like to use sage, for example, on Palo Santo, but when you have a lot of clients coming through your door, too much sage is too much sage. So I would probably sage my entire house, for example, once a month. I use Palo Santo almost every day in my own personal ceremonies, but to sage and cleanse crystals after every client, I find too much. My lungs get too filled up with it. So, but every client, my crystals gets cleansed, and then throughout the month, I will smudge my house. I play my bowls all the time. I play my drum all the time. So they're constantly being cleansed. And that's why the energy is quite high in my house. But for you at home, if you've got beautiful crystals sitting on the shelf looking pretty and not doing too much work, once or twice a month is perfect. Okay. Does that make sense? You can all nod your heads.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think that, I guess one of the things about full moon is that it just brings an awareness to people that a month has passed, that
Yes.
That the crystals need a little bit of help. And, I have too many crystals as well to be able to put them all out under full moon.
Yeah.
And so, using a little bit of sound sounds wonderful, and intention sounds really beautiful. So you've covered a few little do's and don'ts, but in essence, why would people need to use crystals, Leisa?
Perfect question. I don't think you can live without crystals. That's just my honest truth. And if you're here tonight, you're probably agreeing with me at some level. So Kylie's definitely agreeing there. So what crystals do for us, a lot of people gather a collection of crystals, and then they have all these crystals at home, and they have them in little boxes, in plastic boxes in their cupboard and their drawers. They have them on their bookshelf. And generally, a lot of people don't know what to do with them. They buy them because they're pretty. They buy them because they're beautiful. And they read in a book that it has this magic, okay? But really the reason that we're drawn to crystals is because they are a vibration, and what it does is draw energy from out of our body into the crystal or to the crystal. And basically, if you think about two things, this is a person and this is a crystal, they're really like a magnetic force. Okay, the crystal wants to speak to the body and the body wants to speak to the crystal on a soul level, on a cell level. So when we're drawn to a crystal, it's because that's what our body is needing at the moment to heal. Okay, and I believe that crystals have been programmed by different galaxies and different worlds, and we find crystals, particular crystals in the ground. We mine particular crystals when it's time for that particular energy to be discovered and for that type of healing to happen on the earth. Okay, so you'll notice if you've been collecting crystals for a long time, there's lots of crystals that you can't find anymore. 20, 30 years ago, they were really abundant, and now they've completely almost, just non-existent. Okay, whereas other crystals, they're finding new crystals all the time. So pink amethyst is a great example. It's my new favorite. It's only been around for 12, 18 months, and that's because of the energy that the pink amethyst holds is really, for me, about inner child healing. And the earth really needs inner child. We all need inner child healing right now. Okay, we all need to deal with that shadow. So we find crystals in abundance when the world is ready for that type of healing, for that type of energy. And we are personally drawn to a crystal when our body is needing that type of healing or, that type of energy. Does that make sense?
It does. And I love the fact that new crystals are coming through as we're needing the energetic support as we are shifting our consciousness and moving from 3D to 5D. Yeah. So touching on leaving messages, do you know a bit about, you do know a bit about the Lemurian crystals. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, perfect. So the myth or the legend, depending on what you believe, is that Lemurian crystals have come obviously through the times of Lemuria and into Atlantis. And Lemurian crystals, I believe, and a few of you I know already believe that they are quite high vibrational. They're much more high vibrational than a lot of crystals. They come in a particular formation, which is all natural. And they say that when you get a Lemurian, when you find a Lemurian, that Lemurian is for you, okay? And when you, it has an activation point on it, and when you rub your thumb across the activation point, all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge and all of the healing that is in that crystal comes out for you, okay? So I buy quite a few Lemurians, and I always know when I get them that they're not for me. So I only own, I think, 2 or 3 Lemurians. I've bought lots of them, but I get them home and I rub my thumb and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's not for me. I'll put you aside. And I know straight away, who they're for. When someone says, I'm looking for a Lemurian, I'm like, yep, that's the one for that person. So I think that there is a Lemurian for every person that's ready for that knowledge and ready for that information. But I also believe that, there's no mistake. A lot of people have concerns and issues around the sustainability of mining crystals, which I completely understand. And that's a whole story that we may or may not get into tonight. But there is no mistake that crystals are found where they're found and when they're found, I believe. And I think they're all coded with ancient knowledge and information for the person who will be its temporary safekeeper.
Now, you take it one step further and you do crystal gridding. So for people who don't really understand, the purpose or the intention behind a crystal grid, can you run us through that, please?
Yes, sure. Well, crystal grids is a very big subject, but when we make crystal grids for ourselves or our own purposes, what happens in a crystal grid becomes a vortex of energy. And some of you might know that there's crystal grids that are set up all around the world in particular points, and they all are the earth keepers, the people that are particularly here to work with those, the ley lines and all of that kind of thing, join up all of those crystal grids around the world, around our planet. But for us, we can create a beautiful vortex of energy in a very small space. And when you set that up, when you activate a grid, what happens is it becomes that vortex of energy, And inside of that vortex of energy is where you manifest your dreams and your goals and your desires. And truly anything is possible inside of that little space. So briefly, that's what it is. And the way that there's a few different components to a grid, I suppose. And some of you may or may not have heard of the term of sacred geometry. So we set a grid up in a sacred geometric pattern for particular reasons, because the sacred geometry is how the energy flows around the universe. And everything in our universe is made up of a geometric pattern, a sacred pattern, even though you may not recognize it. And when you set crystals up in a geometric pattern, it creates that flow of energy inside of the grid, okay? And then what you do with the grid is you set it for a particular period of time. So you can set one up forever, okay? For example, I've got my property set up as in a crystal grid that always stays up, but I interact with it regularly to keep it activated. And then I make other grids up. Sometimes I make them up for people and, you know, family and friends who may have had some grief in their life. And I might set one up for a period of 24 hours where I focus all of my energy into that grid and send healing via that grid, okay? And then other times you set up, say, for example, an abundance grid. You might set that up for 28 days. So I set my grids up past 24 hours. I set them up for 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, or 28 days. And again, following the moon cycle. So I remember when I've done it. and you visualize what it is that you want. And that's how you get what you want, is by visualizing it. So if you want a new car, you set up a grid, an abundance grid for to attract a new car. You see yourself driving down the street in that little red car with the, you know, bright lights and the mags on it. Whatever it is that you want, you visualize that you have already got it, and that's how you get it.
It sounds magical, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it truly is magical. And you'll notice when you activate a grid, if you've set it up, say, for 7 days, you'll notice on that 8th day, the energy is completely dispersed out of that grid.
So, Leisa, do you teach crystal gridding?
I do. So I teach a diploma of crystal healing and crystal shamanism. And in that, we learn about grids. It's not in depth though, and I'm actually in the process of writing a new crystal grid workshop, which will be exciting, that I'm going to run online. So that'll be exciting when it's ready.
And that's the layered parts. So not just crystal, but shamanism. Can you tell people a little bit about the shamanic history, how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. Many years ago, I had, back in the 90s, I had a spirit drawn for me, and it was of an American Indian with, his name was given to me at that time. But because I was in my early 20s and I hadn't connected with this spirit guide, and I thought, oh yeah, everyone's got an American Indian spirit guide, that means nothing to me, rolled it up, packed it away. And about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I had a reading down here in Melbourne. I was still living in Brisbane at the time, but I had a reading down here, and the lady brought through this same spirit guide and gave me the same name. And he had already been popping into my healings and my readings and things, but I hadn't really connected with him. I hadn't put it all together. And then she gave me the name of this spirit guide, and he gave me lots of information about what I needed to do in my healings. And about that same time, I had a lot of my belongings in storage for about 8 years. And I had to move all of that stuff that was in storage and unpack it. And you guessed it, I unpacked this spirit guide drawing, and he was this American Indian with the same name, and my head was blown off. So really from about that stage, sorry, my computer's trying to update. I kind of knew that that was the connection. But when I started to learn about shamanism, was probably also about 5 or 6 years ago, it was so familiar to me that I was like, I've already been doing this. I already know what this is about. And I know Jen's shaking her head. She was the same. And the reason that shamanism is so popular these days is because really it's a call home. It's a call to who we are and who remembering who we are. So people get scared about the word shaman, and we are not shamans. We're shamanic practitioners. And you know, the call for me, they say that it's a call to that way of life, to a life of service as a shaman or a shamanic practitioner. And I've been working on that path now for about 5 years, and it just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And you know, the initiations that I've been through and continue to go through are very powerful. They're very deep. And you know, yeah, it's really, really special to me. So most of my work these days is shamanic, and sort of the ceremonial work, and you know, with the crystals laid in on top of it. So so that's it.
It all goes very nicely together, doesn't it?
It does.
Now,
And go on, sorry.
Oh, no, I think that I had seen some questions popping up. So I was just going to double check. There's a couple of things in the chat box. So I didn't know if you wanted to keep, so it was just someone asking about, do you teach crystal grids? So we covered that. And with the crystal grid, does it matter what crystals you use, or is it just more about the intention?
Good question. It's a bit of both. So the way that I've been taught, and the way that I teach crystal gridding, is that we start with a center crystal. And I'm just, sorry, this is the roundest crystal I've got near me at the moment, which is a black obsidian sphere. So obviously you do not have to have a crystal this big in the middle of your grid, but you can start off with a tiny little crystal.
Are you sure that's not a bowling ball?
It's very big. It's quite heavy. But basically we start with a bigger crystal in the center of our grid. And then the crystal that's in the middle of the grid kind of sets the intention for the rest of your grid. Okay. So for example, if you were setting up a grid for abundance, the abundance stones that I like to use are citrine, pyrite, jade, and green aventurine. Okay, so I would have one of those crystals in the center of my grid. And then it doesn't matter if I have no other colored crystals. If I put 6 clear quartz points around that center grid, the anchor, then that's all you need. Okay. And then if you want to make it, a lot of people get scared about making grids because they don't have enough crystals or don't have enough of the same type of crystal. And really it doesn't matter, because as long as you've got that center crystal and the 6 clear quartz points around it, then anything else that you can add is perfect. So it's a bit of combination between the intention of that crystal and also the intention for the grid. So good question.
And on your website, you actually can send crystal grids off to people that you do up for them.
Yes. I make a lot of custom grids these days. I used to make a lot of them and take them to the expos. But I find these days that I don't have time to make kind of downloaded grids and take them off to places to be sold. So I get a lot of custom orders. So what happens for me when someone says to me, can you make me a grid? Straight away, usually I get a download of information. So the questions that I ask the people is, first of all, what's your budget? Which doesn't really mean much to me, because that kind of just gives me an idea of what size frame I'm going to make. But then whatever crystals need to be in that grid go into that grid. So what someone's paid for it usually is about half of the amount of the crystals that I put into it. So I get a download of information. So I either get a download of the crystals that I need to use in that grid, or I get a download of information of what structure the grid needs to take. And sometimes that happens really quickly, and sometimes it takes a long time. So, like for example, Helen, who's on tonight, I've made a couple of grids for Helen. And one of those was for a wedding present for her daughter and son-in-law. And it took me weeks. I was given the center of the crystal and the shape of the crystal straight away as soon as Helen and I spoke about it. And I didn't know what crystal it was. I could see it, but I didn't know what it was. And I had to go on a journey to look for a crystal. And then it ended up being a golden topaz, which for those of you who know a little bit about crystals, are, you know, very expensive. But fortunately, it was little pieces that needed to be in the grid, not, you know, big chunks of it, thank goodness, for both Helen and I. But that's how it comes about. So usually there's very few grids that I make more than one of, because it's all downloaded information for that specific person. And sometimes I scour through hundreds of crystals looking for the right crystals to put in a grid. And if I can't find it, I'll go buy more to look through. And sometimes it's not till I pull out those last 2 crystals out of the bag that I know that the grid is ready and the grid is done and what the purpose of that grid is. So, yeah, so I do sell them. I either sell them loose, and you can put it together however you'd like it to be, or I box frame them for people, which are really nice presents for people as well. So, yeah. And there's a couple more questions about there on, Diane's asked me, do the points point inwards or outwards? So the way that we teach it is that the points point inwards, and that's so that they amplify the energy of the center crystal. Okay, if that makes sense. And it doesn't matter if you don't have points, you can use tumble stones. Okay, they work the same way, but usually that's why we include 6 clear points in the grids that I make, because it's amplifying the energy of that center crystal.
And when you're doing your grid up, do you need the quartz wand to activate?
Yes, yeah. You don't necessarily need to have a clear quartz, but you can use your finger and either a clear quartz point or your finger, and you trace around the crystals, connecting them all together while you're putting your intention into that grid. Yeah, you can do all sorts of things. You can put it on an altar. You can include other crystals. You can include flowers and candles and a list of the things that you're trying to manifest. You can hang them on a wall. You know, just put them anywhere that feels right for you, really. I make them on my drums all the time.
Beautiful. Leisa, I want to just ask, you know, one of those niggling questions about purchasing crystals and sometimes finding them really, really cheap. You know, are they real crystals? Have they been dyed? What's the story with that?
Yes, look, unfortunately these days, you've got to be really careful about the places that you buy crystals from. There are lots and lots and lots of crystals that are fake on the market and that are dyed. And I can probably guarantee you that all of you who have bought crystals have got a fake or a dyed crystal in your collection without your knowledge. It happens all the time. I see people that I'm friends with on Facebook, they've bought crystals from places and I know straight away that they're fake or they're dyed, but it's not my place to tell them that. Lots and lots of people send me photos and say, is this real? And unfortunately, that's the way it is at the moment. You know, unfortunately, China is amazing at recreating crystals. They all come out of China. But you can't not buy crystals from China either, because the bulk of crystals, particularly those that are carved into a shape, have come through China. So like even our beautiful mookaite, for example, the only place in the world that mookaite is found is in Australia, and we send it all to China to be carved. So you can't not buy crystals from China. And there is, some crystals are really easy to tell, and some crystals are really hard to tell whether or not they're fake and even dyed. And I guess what I guarantee my clients when they buy crystals from me is that I have tested a lot of crystals. And now when I go to my wholesale, a couple of my wholesalers, they'll have a box there and they'll say, hey, Leisa, look at these crystals. Can you tell us whether they're fake? So that's a nice position for me to be in. But also at the same time, it's not nice because our wholesalers don't even know that their crystals are, you know, fake or dyed. So there's lots of different ways to test crystals, and it is time consuming sometimes, but that's my guarantee to my clients, is that I've done the best that I can, and I've tested as much as I can to make sure that the crystals that I'm buying are legitimate. And I have 2 tips for you. Do not buy crystals from Wish or Amazon, and a lot of the times eBay.
And I guess, you know, if you're wanting something pretty to sit on your shelf, then, you know, a fake crystal's fine if you're just wanting it for the looks. But if you're wanting to tap into the healing power of the frequency of the earth and what's been generated from that crystal, then you're wanting something that is genuine.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, everything has energy. So some people can't feel the energy in a crystal. Even a glass ball has energy. So, you know, some people will just never know. And that's a really good question that leads me into a point about, you know, the magic of crystals. People think that if they buy a crystal and that they've read that it has all these magical powers, that when they put it in their hand, it's going to magically create that healing magic for them. And it's not, because it's like anything. You've got to put the work into it. You've got to use the crystal and get to know it before you can understand what it does for you and what it's going to help you with in your life, if that makes sense. So a lot of people come to me and say, I need this crystal, and this person has told me that I must have this crystal and I must wear it around my neck and I must not put it down, which I do not agree with. I would never tell anybody that that's what they need. So I always encourage people to pick the crystal that they are drawn to. So if someone comes and says to me, I'm looking for a crystal for self-confidence, for example, I will give them my opinion based on the work that I've done with the crystals that I've worked with, and secondly, what I know from the books, okay, because I've also done a lot of study. But because I'm giving you my experience, the crystal that I recommend for self-confidence would be potentially quite different to what's written in the book or Google, or to the crystal seller down the road, okay? But most of the time, I'm giving you my personal experience of working with a crystal. And where I've not worked with a crystal for that particular purpose, then I would go to the book and look it up. But I would never say to anybody, this is the crystal that you need. I would say these would be my suggestions. You pick one that feels right for you, because that's the one that your body needs. So sometimes people come and say, I need a rose quartz because I've just broken up with a boyfriend. But what they end up getting is something completely different, because that's what their body's calling out for. Does that make sense to people?
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. Now, I'm checking in at the time, and I want to allow enough time so that people can ask enough questions. So please, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box. If you don't know where to find your chat box, if you're on a computer, it's down the bottom with a little speech bubble that says chat. Click on that and type your questions into the chat box. And if you don't mind, Lisa, I'm just going to run and have a look here. Oh, sure. Louise also asked, how do you tell if it's fake?
Very good question, Louise. Look, it's really difficult, and it depends on the crystal. So I'll give you an idea of clear quartz, for example, because quartz is often one that comes across as you get glass, that people sell it as glass. So I've just got a clear quartz here, and I'm not going to scratch my glass, but a perfect test to see whether a clear quartz, what you think is a clear quartz, is to scratch it on a glass. So I use my pickles jar out of the fridge, or the Vegemite jar, okay, not a glass that you don't want to scratch, and scratch it on the glass. If the glass scratches, it's quartz. If it doesn't scratch, it's glass, okay? That's the easiest way to tell. So I have bought a number of crystals there's lots of different qualities of quartz, for example, and a couple that I've bought that because I usually hand pick all of the crystals that I sell, but sometimes that's just not possible, particularly at the moment. so a couple I've got, and I usually don't buy quartz unless I've hand picked it myself, but a couple I've been a little bit, they've apparently been high quality, and I'm like, I'm not sure. So the glass test will instantly tell. The other way to tell if it's very, very clear, so say like a sphere, for example, if this was a clear quartz sphere and I could see straight through it and my fingers out the other side were not magnified, then good chance it's quartz. If my fingers are magnified, it's probably going to be glass, okay? And if it's clear with no, fractions or scratches or anything like that in it, probably glass too. So there's lots of ways to tell.
Louise is asking, can you test it with a pendulum?
Well, yes, you can, but that depends on the relationship that you have with your pendulum. If you trust your pendulum and you trust that you are connected to your higher self when using your pendulum, absolutely. Yeah.
Super. So Kylie said your crystals are amazing and she loves them. Josanne says, should you ever wash your crystals? I know that there's some that should never be put near water.
Yes, very good question. And actually, Fiona Corsen's got a question just above that. Hi, Fiona. Goldstone, I'll come back to that. So remind me. So some crystals should not be put in water. And there's kind of a bit of a story to that. So the first one and the most one that people kind of come across is selenite. So selenite can't be put in water. It won't dissolve on you the second you run it under the tap. But what happens over time is that it loses its beautiful lustrous look, its shiny look, and it starts to become very dull. And it will start to become even more brittle than what it already is. So it'll just eventually kind of just, whittle away. But there's also lots of crystals that are toxic. Well, actually all crystals are toxic, but all crystals that end in ITE should not be put into the water, and that water consumed, taken orally, or in a bath and you sit in it, okay? So people, the reason for that is that crystals come out of the ground and they are minerals, okay? They're all made up of minerals, and not all minerals are safe. So a lot of crystals have got lead in them, they've got copper, they've got iron, they've got arsenic, they've got asbestos. So there's all sorts of minerals that come out of the ground and make up our beautiful crystals. A lot of them should not be ingested, okay? So if you're making crystal essence, for example, I very rarely make a crystal essence where the crystals have actually touched the water. The crystals would sit outside of the water, still has the same effect, still has the same vibration. Make sense?
Absolutely. If you were to put crystals in a water bottle, which is the safest crystal you'd put in?
Clear quartz I have put into my bottles before, but I don't do that all the time. And the reason for that is, even though clear quartz is beautiful, they have been cleaned. They don't come out of the ground nice and pretty like this. They come out covered in mud, and they are cleaned and polished with harsh chemicals. So even if you put a clear quartz in your water bottle, you're still getting that, residual chemical kind of, stuff. The only really crystal that's safe to have in your water is shungite. So, and there's 3 or 4 different grades of shungite. And shungite, even though it has ITE on the end, is a water purifier. So it has carbon in it. So what it does is it draws out all of the nasties out of the water. Okay, so that's pretty much the only one you would do. In terms of washing your crystals, I didn't really answer that question. Some people like to wash their crystals in water for energetic cleansing. I personally don't do that, but occasionally I do need to physically cleanse my crystals. So I have been known to take crystals to the beach in my colander and sit on the beach with the colander of water swishing over the crystals. I have also taken a 5.5 kilo amethyst cluster to the beach with the toothbrush, a soft toothbrush, and sat in the water and cleansed my crystals that way. So, and if I can't get to the beach, if it's too cold, I do occasionally use filtered water and some beautiful natural Himalayan salt, so undyed Himalayan salt, and used a toothbrush to clean the dirt and the dust off. So, yeah, but that's it.
But Leisa, just a curious question, if those crystals are all being treated with chemicals, how do you think the crystals, I know crystals don't have feelings, but it sort of feels like an assault on a crystal to have been cleansed with all those chemicals in order for us to have them.
Yeah, and look, that's the debate sometimes, I guess, as well as the sustainability of the mining practices as well. Look, it's common practice that they're cleansed in harsh chemicals. Otherwise, they wouldn't look as pretty as what they do. And I guess that's even more reason that they need to be energetically cleansed. And sometimes when you buy crystals, you can feel the journey that they've been on to get into your hand. So sometimes crystals will need months of cleansing before they're ready to use. So cleansing in the ground or cleansing under a copper pyramid, for example, and they need to stay there for months before they're ready to be used. So yeah, it's a harsh reality, unfortunately.
I know that, when the kids were little and you'd go into a crystal shop and they almost look like lolly jars, and the kids would want to buy their crystal, the first thing I would do is taking that sticker off in the shop to cut that first energetic tie with that energy, and trying to teach the kids that, that's just the physical way of reminding you that there's other things that you need to do to clear the energy, because you don't want to bring that also into your home.
Yeah, exactly. I lost my train of thought there, but people often say to me, oh, I don't like going to that shop because the energy's not nice. But, a crystal is a crystal, and all crystals can be cleansed. So what I encourage people to do is, if the shop doesn't feel so nice, don't worry about it, because you can take that crystal home. If you love that crystal, take it home, cleanse it properly, and then it'll be, brand new, sparkling, and ready for you to use. So, because if you think about the process of a crystal to get to your hand, it's been dug out of the ground by who knows who, possibly a child. It's gone on a big truck. It's been smashed to pieces with either big machinery or, cutting tools or something like that. It's gone into a factory where if it's, been a carved crystal, then it's been put on machinery and carved and used all those chemicals to get it clean and into that beautiful shape. Then it's gone into some kind of box and put on a ship or on an aeroplane and brought to Australia. Even if it's an Australian crystal, it's possible that it's been overseas and come back to us. And then it's arrived in a warehouse. Then someone's picked it out of a warehouse and brought it to the retail shop and put it on display. 1,000 people have touched it, and then you've got it home. So the journey that crystal's been on before it gets to you is huge. So that's why cleansing is very, very important.
That's a brilliant, brilliant reminder. I might just check some more questions and see what's coming through. Should you just, is it okay to bathe with rose quartz?
Look, the same applies to, it's really up to you. Some people believe that the metaphysical and the healing properties of crystals far outweigh those chemicals that have been used. So if you feel comfortable with putting rose quartz in your bath, then I would say yes. Okay. Lots of people have rose quartz in their drinking filter water. So is it safe? I would say yes. I personally wouldn't sell water that has had rose quartz sitting in it, but that's your personal choice.
And Fiona's asked, is goldstone a fake crystal because it's man-made?
Yes. So first of all, there is a real gold stone, which is quite expensive and very rare. It's very hard to find it. But the gold stone that most of you know would be the brownie coloured crystal with shiny gold bits through it. Yes, it's fake, and yes, it's man-made. And so is the other variety of that, the blue, do they call it blue stone or blue gold stone? I don't know what it's called, but it's the same thing, dark blue with beautiful spark. They look beautiful, but yes, they're fake. And so is opalite. There's a real opalite, but the opalite that probably most of you will know is man-made.
Okay. Now, do you know much about crystal skulls and the story behind them?
Oh my
That's
goodness.
a big story.
If I'd known someone was going to ask that question, I would have brought in my skull collection.
I feel another webinar coming on, Leisa.
So I collect crystal skulls, and a lot of people freak out about that. I'm not into, you know, skull tattoos or skulls that you buy in the $2 shop, but I'm into crystal skulls. And the myth or the legend around that is that you know, when the eyes of a crystal skull are carved is when the magic kind of happens. And what I believe and what many people believe is that the skulls hold ancient information that are ready to give to us when we come across it and when we connect with it. You know, I'm not an Indiana Jones fan, but the Indiana Jones movie, and I don't even know what it's called. It's about the 13 skulls. Someone might be able to remind me what it is, but that is a true story. There is 13 human-sized skulls buried around the earth, around our planet, and there are people looking for those skulls. And when they find all 13 skulls and they join them up, magic is going to happen. Who knows what that magic is? It might be the end of our world, but it could also mean something very different as well. So yes, I love skulls.
You can feel the gathering of the grandmother energy there when you're speaking. So Zinnia's asking, what book would you suggest to buy that has pictures of crystals and their meaning?
Good question. I actually covered this last night on my live on my business page. There really isn't one book that I would recommend. I've got a number of books that I have and that I would reference, you know, on one occasion to look up one crystal. So my laptop is actually leaning on a couple of those books, so I won't tip my laptop up. But one that's really good with pictures is the Book of Stones by Robert Simmons. That's a really good book. That is one underneath my computer, so I can't show you, but I can put a list to give Taryn a list if you like to put into the email that goes out. There's also a really great book that I've kind of in the last 12 months been working with, and it's called Crystals by Cassandra Eason. What I like about this book, I didn't like it to start with because it's not in alphabetical order. But what it is great for is for people who have got a crystal and they know what colour it is, obviously, but they don't know what it's called. So you can go to the blue section and flick through all of the blue crystals and hopefully find one that is, you know, looks like the one that you've got. Of course, you know, I teach to this book, which is the Crystal Book by Rochelle Sharman. So I teach to that book. It doesn't have all of the crystals in it, but what it's really great for is that it has I don't know if you can see that, down the bottom of the page, there has a place where you can write your own experience with the crystals, because of course that's what we encourage. And then a lot of people like Melody, the Melody Crystal book. I can't remember the full name of it. Melody, The World of Crystals or The Love of Crystals or something, is a very old book. My version that's sitting underneath my laptop is from 1995, but there are a couple of new versions out. I'm not a fan of Judy Hall books. The Judy Hall books are the Crystal Bibles, but a lot of people like them. A lot of people use them. I do own one Judy Hall book, and that's this one, which is Crystal Prescriptions. So when people come to me at the markets and expos and things like that, and they say, hey, can I have a crystal, you know, for this particular purpose? And, because I don't know everything, or I can't remember everything either, this little book is quite handy to reference. So it doesn't tell you, it doesn't have pictures, and it doesn't give you the name of the crystal. It gives you the ailment and then a list of crystals that would be good for that ailment. So that's quite a good little pocket book as well. But there's hundreds of them out there.
So the next question is, when crystals break, should you discard them, and how do you discard them?
Yeah, great question. First of all, if you are attuned to the energy of that crystal, sometimes a crystal breaking doesn't make any difference to the purpose and the use of that crystal. So if you get the feeling that it's okay to still continue working with that crystal, then go ahead and do that. For me, I'm quite a little bit clumsy sometimes, and I break a lot of crystals. So I have got a little bucket basically full of broken crystals that eventually I either put into pot plants, because I make crystal terrariums, and a little broken crystal in a crystal terrarium no one will ever kind of worry about. Otherwise, I bury them in the earth. They love going back to the earth. And sometimes I use them in arts and crafts kind of projects. And then sometimes they just sit in a bowl and continue to look beautiful. So yeah, it kind of depends. Ask the crystal what it wants to do.
Now, Rhonda's saying her mum has passed away and she had a few crystals lying around the house. Can she keep them? Is that a good idea if she's a novice?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, sorry to hear about your mum. What I would do is take the crystals home and make sure they have a really good cleanse. If your mum has been unwell leading up into her death, it's possible that those crystals have taken on some of that illness. So to give you an example, some people love to use crystals through their cancer journey, for example. And what I often have found is that the crystals will turn black. So once a crystal's turned black, there's no coming back from that. You have to bury the crystal and let it go back to the universe for the healing that it needs to do. But if your mum hasn't been, receiving treatment or been really unwell, you can take those crystals home and give them a really good cleanse in the ways that we've spoken about. And then if you feel like they're yours to keep them. And if they don't feel like they're yours to keep, then give them away or sell them, or just send them to the $2 shop, the opportunity shop. I hear about people getting beautiful crystals at the opportunity shop all the time.
Wonderful. So the final question, and we'll close it off as the final question there from Diane. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the crystal skulls. Do you know how many have been found? Diane had done Rochelle's Crystal Awakening course a few years ago. So do you know how many crystal skulls have been found since?
I do not know how many. I believe that a couple have been found. But again, there's lots of, cover-up stories. So I haven't read too deeply into to that side of it. But I do remember reading or hearing about that there was at least 2 or 3 of those crystal skulls that have been found. But to be honest, I haven't done too much research into it. So I can't give you an accurate, Jen's thumbing me. So that must be about right. About 5? Okay.
Sign language here. So now you have a really beautiful, generous heart, and you have gifted everybody who's live on the call today a magic PDF. Can you let everyone know a little bit about your magic PDF and what's in there?
Sure. A couple of you might already have it, but it's 5 steps to getting to know your crystals better. So it talks about how you cleanse your crystals, how you program them, and then what you do with them, which we haven't really spoken about tonight, what you do with the crystal once you've got it. So it's got some of that information in it.
I think we ran out of time. We've covered, we went far and wide with everything here tonight, and it feels like I still haven't got enough information. I want more, but we'll send that PDF out to everybody tomorrow in the email. But Christine, if I can get you to draw everyone's, to get the names, and what I might do is get you to also explain what you're gifting as the prize for tonight, the Lucky Door prize.
Yes, Lucky Door prize. So I'm just gifting a 3-card crystal card reading, which will just kind of be a mini reading. Yeah, the lucky person who wins that, hopefully it's not Jen Hall. Jen and I are colleagues, so I'm not reading her cards. So the lucky person, just make contact with me via Facebook. My business page is Soul Magic with Leisa, or otherwise just on my personal page. You can see the spelling of my name there. Just make contact with me and we'll organise that for you.
Super. I will unmute Christine. Christine, I'm asking to unmute you, so you might need to just unmute yourself. Christine, can you draw a lucky person?
Sure. So that would be, I'll just pick one here, sorry. The Lucky Door prize goes to Louise.
Lise, where's Lise? I'm trying
Louise,
to take you.
L-O-U-I-S-E.
Louise?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, beautiful.
Is she here? I'm just trying to see. Louise, I'm just going to unmute you. There you go.
Thank you. That's been exciting. Lovely, Leisa.
Well done. Well done. Louise and I are already Facebook friends, so message me and we'll organise that for you, Louise.
Cool. Thanks, Leisa.
No worries.
Thanks, Sharon. That's really interesting.
Oh, what a great night.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I just wanted to say such a huge thank you to you, Leisa. This has been truly wonderful, and I've been looking forward to tonight for a long time. Yeah. And if anybody, I've tagged Leisa in all her in all the posts, so you can find her on Facebook. And tomorrow we'll, with her magic PDF, you'll be able to connect in further. There'll be details how to contact her. And I know for a fact that some people on the call tonight were actually very curious about some crystal grids. And especially if you have a place of business and you're wanting to generate some prosperity and abundance and wealth. And, I think, Lisa's the lady to go to during this time for that. Thank you so much for your time and your beautiful energy filling our space, for your generosity with your gifts for everyone, your generosity with your time, your knowledge and your wisdom. Thank you all to our beautiful guests who have joined us on this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. when it's a difficult time when everyone else is supposed to be sitting down for dinner. We are very grateful that you prioritised your time to spend with us. So from Leisa and myself to all of you, we wish you a wonderful week ahead, and we're very grateful for your time here tonight. Next week at our meetup, we have Diane Elson, and is Diane still here? Here we go. I might just unmute Diane. Hi, Diane.
Hello, Taryn. How are you? I'm sorry I'm in the dark here.
In the dark. She'll have better lighting next week to see her face. So Diane is from Rest Assured Queensland, and she will be talking about damaging frequencies that, to your frequency. So and some tips around that. So I'm looking forward to having Diane on our call next week at 7 p.m. So thank you to you all. The email will go out tomorrow with the recording of the Zoom link. There will be a magic PDF for all of you from Leisa, as well as maybe just the written names of those books, Leisa.
Yep, absolutely.
Fabulous. Super. And have a wonderful evening to you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.